Welcome to a webinar on going mobile with Lightroom, featuring Mark Fitzgerald, hosted by ASMP Executive Director Tom Kennedy. Take it away, Tom.
All right. Thanks, Doug, as always, for helping facilitate the technology behind the webinar, and thanks everyone for joining in today. I'm delighted to have Mark on as our guest because he's an expert on Lightroom, and he works regularly with photographers of all types to help them understand how to better handle digital workflow, whether using Lightroom or Photoshop. He does training, consulting, and offers classes based on his long background in working with photography, both in the photo labs originally and now, obviously in the digital arena. I think it's great that he's on because there's a lot that can be learned about connecting Lightroom, both the mobile and digital parts of the app. So Mark, take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So today I'm going to talk about going mobile with Lightroom and some of the cool things you can do. Before I get started on that, I just want to share my contact information with people. If the PDF slideshow you're going to see here, if anyone wants a handout of that, they can email me at mark@ddroom.com, and I'll be happy to send you a PDF of it, because I know there'll probably be a couple of people who would like to get that. And so I'm just going to leave this up here for just a moment longer, so you can just at least write down the email address. My business is named Digital Darkroom, so that's what the DD Room stands for. Okay, and one other thing I want to mention is that I, along with a bunch of other people, are on the ASMP recommended speaker list. And if you are in an ASMP chapter, we're available to come out and speak to your chapter about a whole range of subjects. So I encourage everyone to take a look at some of the talented people on that list. All right, so today what we're going to cover is some basic stuff about syncing, kind of go over the fundamentals of it. I'm going to talk about how to set up the desktop and mobile so that your mobile devices can sync up to your desktop. And then I'm going to go into working with synced collections, because that's really the linchpin between your Lightroom Classic on the desktop and your mobile Lightroom. Also, we'll show one of my favorite features is how easy it is to upload a really quick impromptu gallery. And then with whatever time we have toward the end, I'm going to go over a few things on the Lightroom mobile app. I could spend the whole program just on that one thing, so I'm just going to point out a couple of quick things since we're sort of limited on time. This program that I'm doing today is extracted from a 3-hour class that I normally teach, so I tried to pick the high points. My goal is really to introduce everyone to what's possible and sort of get you in a position where you can get started with this and then maybe learn more as you get going. So let's start talking about some of the basic concepts. Most people who are using Lightroom these days are probably using the subscription model, which is run through Adobe's Creative Cloud. If I come up to the top of my screen up here and I click on Adobe Creative Cloud and I pull this over, this is what it looks like now. It's changed within the past few weeks. And this is just a good way for me to check on what programs need to be updated, etc. So it is that thing that connects all your programs, but Adobe Creative Cloud also functions as an intermediary between your desktop and your mobile devices. So when I want something to be on my mobile device from my Lightroom Classic, it goes through Adobe's Creative Cloud and goes down to the mobile device. If I'm shooting photos on my mobile device with my mobile camera and I want them to be on my desktop, they go through the Creative Cloud and they're copied down to my desktop, which is also a really cool feature. You can also import directly to a tablet or a phone. So I can plug a card reader into one of my mobile devices and import directly out of a camera card. And those photos can be copied directly to my desktop. I'm not going to be going over that today, but that is kind of a cool feature for someone who's on the road and maybe doesn't want to bring a laptop, but they've got mobile devices that have plenty of storage space. So really, this is what this looks like. I shoot photos with my camera. I import those files into my desktop Lightroom Classic. They go to the cloud and I put them into a synchronized collection on the desktop, and then they go through the cloud and end up on my mobile device. When we turn it around and look at it from the other direction, if I shoot photos on my mobile device, I can have that set up so that those photos go directly through the Creative Cloud and down into my Lightroom Classic on my desktop. And you'll see in this case, if those original files, copies of them are stored in the cloud and copies are stored on my desktop. If I back up one slide for just a second, you'll see when I import raw photos, they go to my desktop, but the cloud doesn't store those raw files. It just has little proxies, and those proxies are shared with the mobile device. So I'm going to move forward again. So let's keep on going. So the overview of what I'm going to talk about here is you start with Lightroom Classic on the desktop. You want to set up some preferences in Lightroom Classic about where mobile photos will be stored. Then you download the mobile app, you get it all set up, and then you create and synchronize some collections on the desktop that you want to be shared. The cool thing about this is if the photos are on my desktop and they're on my mobile device, excuse me, if I edit those photos, if I put stars or flags on them on my desktop, those things will show up on my mobile device. If I do any of those things on my mobile device, those changes will show up on my desktop. So I can edit photos on an iPad or a phone, and they will be edited on the desktop, which is kind of a nice feature for a lot of people that I've been working with. One of the things to get here, though, is you can only synchronize one Lightroom Classic catalog. You can't have multiple catalogs all synchronized. I know there are a lot of people out there who like to use a different catalog for every shoot. I'm kind of on the other end of that stick. I think it's really important to have just one master catalog with everything in it. And so because I work that way, it makes it really easy for me to work with my mobile devices. If you're someone who works with multiple catalogs, you might have a master catalog that you can sync with your mobile devices, but it gets kind of messy if you're changing which catalog is synchronized. You can do it, but it might be hard to keep track of. So at this time, only one catalog can be synchronized at a time. And I also wanted to throw this in there. I saw this on Adobe's website the other day when I was preparing for this program, and it's a good thing to think about. If you're using Microsoft OneDrive for cloud storage or the Apple iCloud Drive for cloud storage, and you shoot a lot of photos, you could start filling up your storage with photos. So you can exclude the location for Lightroom's images on your iCloud or OneDrive in your OneDrive settings. And you could also, something that I'm going to be showing is you can specify a specific location for your photos that are coming from your mobile device. And you could have that set to a place that is outside of the folders that you're storing in the cloud with OneDrive or Apple iCloud Drive. I don't use either one of those, so I'm not going to be talking much more about that. But just be aware that if you are using those and you feel like you're starting to use up your space, you may want to address that. Okay, so I'm going to move forward here again. So I'm going to talk about how to set this whole process up for synchronizing. So the first thing you need to do is go to your desktop version of Lightroom and click up at the top where your identity plate is. That's up at the top left. And there will be you'll see where it says sync with Lightroom, and then you click the start to get it started. If I go over to my Lightroom for just a minute, you'll see that my syncing is already turned on. If I click up in this area up here, you can see that I am syncing, and it's using 7 gigabytes of the 20 gigabytes that comes along with my Creative Cloud storage. And I use this pretty extensively, and I haven't run out of storage yet, and I haven't even come close to it. But if I were importing a lot of photos directly to my iPad, I could start eating into that storage. But for the way I'm going to be showing you today, it shouldn't be an issue. All right, so let's go back to the slideshow. So you have to turn that on. That's the first step. And then Lightroom will start syncing. And when it does, let me go back to Lightroom for a minute. When you turn that syncing on, a bunch of little boxes are going to appear to the left of these collections. You can see I'm pointing at this graffiti collection over here. It's kind of hard to see. There's a little box next to it. If I click that box right there, which I'll do in a few minutes, it will start syncing that collection. All right, so let's go back to the slideshow. So this is kind of an important part, and this is one part that a lot of people miss, is setting up a specific place where these files are going to be located when they come from my phone. So if I shoot photos with my mobile camera, where will they end up in Lightroom? And I'm going to go back over to Lightroom for a minute. If you don't set this up, what will happen is you'll get something like, if you see over on the left where I'm pointing, so let me zoom in on that for just a minute. It says Mark's iPhone, and it looks like it's a hard drive. what happens is all the photos just get dumped in there loose. They aren't organized in any way. So you could end up with hundreds or even thousands of photos just in a big pile there. And that's not the way I like to work. The way I typically work, if I open up this folder right here, this is one of my regular folders. This isn't mobile. You can see I typically work with folders that have dates on them. And that's the same way that I've got my mobile set up. I have a special section for mobile files, or mobile photos, and they are stored based on date. So here's how you do that. I'm going to go into my preferences. For you Mac users, it's going to be under Lightroom Classic. For you Windows users, it's going to be under Edit, way down at the bottom. So I'm coming into my preferences, and the one you want to pay attention to is the Lightroom Sync. So I'm going to the Lightroom Sync tab. Then you want to check this box that says specify location for Lightroom synced images, and then you want to choose a location. And so when I clicked on choose, I made that location inside of my pictures folder, and I made a folder called Lightroom Mobile Uploads. Then the next thing, which is pretty important, is you want to use subfolders to format how these are going to be organized. And I use the same system that I use when I'm importing regular photos. I use 2019, let me zoom in here for a minute so you can see that. 2019/2019, what that means is it's going to make a folder for the year 2019, and then the slash means it's going to create a subfolder with the date the photos were created. So if I were to shoot some today, then they would go into a folder with that date. You can see there are some other ways to organize the date in here. If you use one of these other ones, then feel free to do that. But this is a kind of a good way to start right here so that you can at least get them sorted out. And I know some people will probably look at this and they go, wow, you know, there's a whole bunch of folders in here with just one or two photos, and I end up with a lot of folders. I still prefer that because it makes it a lot easier for me to go through these photos and decide what I want to keep and what I don't want to keep. In the case of something where I was at an event, so let's go to this one here. This was, we were in San Antonio at Day of the Dead a couple of weeks ago. I probably will put a name after this date here. So I will right click it and put a name that says Day of the Dead, and then I'll move that up into my regular folders up above to put it with my camera photos that I shot when I was at Day of the Dead as well. So it doesn't have to stay in this structure with these mobile photos. I can move it elsewhere if I want to. But the key to doing this is going into your preferences and specifying a location of where those things are going to be stored, and then it starts happening automatically. So that's how the photos coming from the phone are controlled. I'm going to go back over here for a minute, back to the slideshow. So I want to be sure to specify location. And if I skip that, I'm going to end up with that one folder, and that folder is located inside of my, wherever my catalog is located. And all the mobile photos just get dumped in there in a big pile, which that happened to me in the beginning and I didn't like it very much. So I started organizing stuff. After you've got that set up, then you need to download the Lightroom app. And I just put a little picture of it here because a few people have been confused, because when you go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and you search for Lightroom, you might end up with a few different things because people are selling all sorts of Lightroom related apps. This is what you're looking for. It looks like the usual Lightroom icon. Then you just open up that app, you sign into it, and if it asks you for permission to access your mobile camera and your photos, you want to say yes to both of those, because you want to be able to shoot photos on the phone and have them come into the Lightroom system, and you want to be able to use whichever camera you want. Lightroom, if you look over on the right-hand side, I'm going to point with my mouse here for a minute. I've got Lightroom open on my phone over here, and you can see there's a little camera at the bottom. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. I can use that camera. I can use the camera that's already, the camera app that came with my phone, whether it's an Android or an iPhone. If I'm going to be using both cameras, I want to be sure to give Lightroom access to the photos so that it can pick up anything shot with either camera. Once you do that, then you need to set up a couple of preferences on Lightroom Mobile. And I'm going to scoop something out of my way here. Okay, and so I'm going to go through some of those preferences. So again, on the right-hand side of the screen, I'm showing my phone. So I'm looking at the Lightroom app on my phone. And I'm going to go to the little gear icon at the top right. It's right up there at the top right to open my preferences. So I'm going to click that. And I'm going to go over a few of these that are sort of important. So I'm going to the cloud storage and sync, and I'm going to tap that. And you can see right here, I've got 4,300 photos that are currently in this synced system. And I still have plenty of cloud storage available, so I don't have to worry about that. I have used cellular data selected. If you're on a mobile plan where you have limited data, then you might want to turn that off and just wait until you're within Wi-Fi range before things sync up. But if you don't, if you're like me and you have unlimited data, then you can go ahead and turn that on. You'll also want to use only smart previews. You don't really want to be downloading full-size photos. It's not necessary. Smart previews have plenty of data and you can work with them just fine. And then I also have it to prevent it from sleep. If it's in the middle of syncing and it wants to go to sleep, because I don't really want it to do that. I'm going to back up here and I'm going to go to the local storage. So again, this just shows how much is being stored, how much room I've got. Every once in a while, it's a good idea to clear the cache. I'm not going to worry about it right now because again, I'm doing just fine on my storage. I'm going to go to the next slide over here. And I'm going to back this up. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the import settings. And in this case, I've got it set to import my photos. I don't want it to import screenshots. I take screenshots with my phone or my iPad every once in a while, and for specific reasons. I don't really need them to be part of my Lightroom ecosystem, but I do want my videos to come in, because if I shoot video with my phone, I want that to come into Lightroom just like if I shoot video with my camera. I also have a copyright there that gets added. So if I share files, there's a copyright available. I have lens profile correction set down below for RAW only. And the reason I have that for RAW only is sometimes I have non-RAW files like TIFFs that came from a RAW file where it already had geometric corrections done to it, lens profile corrections, and I don't want it to apply a second one on top of the first one that was done. I've had Lightroom do that to me before and I don't really care for it. So I just have it set to do with RAW files only. All right, so I'm going to back up from import and I'm going to go to the sharing options. And again, you can see I can include a watermark here, so I could change that watermark around for this, but just by clicking the customize there. I can include metadata, so I have it set to include metadata, but I could turn that off if I want to. I don't use captions too often, but occasionally I use them. So I have it set to include captions, but I've got my raw info turned off and my location info turned off. I don't see it necessary to share that metadata with things that I might put out on social media or in a gallery. All right, so I'm going to back up from the sharing options. And there's people view. I don't have this turned on. Some people are using it, some people aren't. It's not something I've been using a whole lot, where Lightroom automatically identifies people and helps you kind of keep track of them. It's a nice feature, but for the kind of work that I do, I haven't found it particularly useful. But if you're using it, then you might as well turn it on here too, if you're using it on your desktop. So I've got that one turned off. And then the last one I want to show you is gesture shortcuts. The one down at the bottom where it shows show touches, that's why you can see a red dot every time I touch the screen. I've got that turned on because I want you to be able to see where I'm clicking or tapping. Normally, most people probably want that turned off, but it is useful for me because lots of times I'm sharing my screen with classes or with private clients when we're working remotely. Up above, it says to toggle info, do a 2-finger tap, and that's in grid and loop. So if I get out of here for just a minute, and I'm going to just back out of these settings all the way, and I'm going to open up a album. You can see there's a little bit of metadata that has camera settings. If I do a 2-finger tap, it turns off the metadata, and I'm just tapping, show contributors, nothing to show there, showing the file type. You can see down at the bottom, it's showing that there are some raw files. The rest of them are not raw. If I tap again, now it's showing ones that have flags and stars on them. Tap again, now I'm getting a more comprehensive metadata. I'm going to tap again with 2 fingers, and now I'm back to where I was. So I can just go through and set whatever I want. If I have a single photo, I can do the same thing. You see how I have a histogram up there? If I do a 2-finger tap, I can turn that off. Another 2-finger tap turns on some more metadata. Another 2-finger tap goes back to the histogram. So I can kind of change what information is showing by tapping. I'm going to back out of there, and let's back up one more. Okay, so back to the slideshow. So once I've got my phone all set up and my desktop all set up, now I can start having some fun with this. And so let's talk about collections briefly, because this is really, like I mentioned before, it's the linchpin of how all this stuff works. So in Lightroom, once I turn on the syncing, those little boxes show up to the left of my collections. And if I check that box, that collection will appear as an album over on my phone. And right now you can see I have a whole bunch of albums in here. These are all collections that have been synchronized from the desktop. So I'm going to go over to Lightroom for just a moment. And if I go down to my collections, I'm going to check the box next to the collection called graffiti. And a little message just popped up down here that said it was going to sync that collection with Lightroom Mobile. And this is what that collection looks like right now. It usually takes a few minutes, and so I'll try to be patient here, but we'll probably come back in and look in just a minute. And so I'm looking for graffiti, so it should be showing up somewhere around in here on my phone. And you kind of have to be patient. It depends on a lot of different factors. It depends on your internet connection and a few other things. Okay, so there it is. I don't know if you can see it right here. It's starting to show up on my mobile. If I tap it right now, nothing's in it yet, but those photos are coming. And so it's pretty automatic. They're just going to show up on my mobile device. If there's one that I don't want to be there anymore, like the one above graffiti, I'm back over on the Lightroom on the left-hand side. I'm going to check the little box. See, there's a lightning bolt in that box on the left. Let me zoom in there for a minute. So that lightning bolt right there, that means that's a synchronized collection. And you'll notice all the photos that are synchronized have the little lightning bolt up on the corner in the grid view. So if I come over here to flowers and I uncheck that little spot there, it tells me it's going to stop syncing this collection. Photos aren't going to be deleted or anything. It's just going to pull it off of my phone or my mobile device. So I'm going to hit the stop syncing. And if you look back over at my phone for a minute, you can see graffiti is there now and all those graffiti photos are there. And in a minute, flowers is going to disappear. So it's pretty straightforward, but you have to use a collection. I can't synchronize a folder. You'll notice on these folders in Lightroom over on the left-hand side, there aren't any little boxes to sync those. It has to be a collection. And when you create a new collection, you have the option of syncing that with Lightroom as soon as you create it. And if you do that, it will check that little box to the left for you. Or you can just create a collection, have some photos in it, and turn on the syncing just by clicking the little box over there. Let's get back over to the slideshow. So I just check the box over there. It will pop onto my mobile device. You can set up 4 different mobile devices. I've got it set up with an iPad Pro and with my phone. I have a client who has, he uses it more for personal uses, and he's got his phone and his iPad set up to sync, and he's also got his wife's phone and his son's phone set up to sync. So any photos that they shoot also come into his ecosystem. I don't know how much his teenage son likes that, but it works for him. Okay, and just be aware that there's a difference in nomenclature. They're called collections on the desktop and they're called albums on mobile. Once I have those things set up, I can start applying whatever kinds of adjustments I want. So I'm going to go back here for a minute. You'll notice that I have a album on the phone named Portfolios. Inside of that, I've got other albums, so you can group things together. So I'm just going to come back in here. If I go to this photo, and I'll cover what I'm doing right now in just a minute. But if I want to rate and review this, do you notice there are stars down at the bottom and there are flags on the bottom on the phone down here? So this is how I can apply stars and flags. I can also just drag up and down. So I'm dragging on the right-hand side up to put a pick flag on it, down to put a reject, in the middle, nothing. If I drag up and down on the left, I can put stars on it. And this is really useful when editing on an iPad, which I do pretty frequently because there's a little bit more space for that kind of dragging. Or I can just come down, if I want 3 stars on, I can just click 3 stars and put 3 stars on it. There aren't any colored labels. So if you're a desktop user and you use color labels, then this is going to throw you a little bit. You can only do stars and flags, no colored labels. In fact, if I put colored labels on the desktop version of Lightroom Classic, let's say I put a green label on this photo, it's not going to show up over here. And I also want to point out that the display you're seeing of my phone, the color isn't perfectly correct. I found there was nothing I could do about the way the phone shows up on my computer. So just bear with me and know that my color looks a little better than that. So again, anything that I do on the mobile device carries over to the desktop. Anything that I do on the desktop carries over to the mobile device. If I have a photo on the desktop, come back to the desktop for just a minute. So if I've got something here, and let me go back to my graffiti collection. So I'm going to back up here, go down to graffiti. If I have a photo I don't want in there anymore, like this first one, and I remove it from the collection, then it's going to be removed from the album on the phone. It's as simple as that. They're just connected all the time. And this is really cool because when you're working with your photos on the desktop, and if I want something to be on the phone in an album, I just put it into that collection. It's already synced and it gets taken care of. I don't have to do anything else. And I find that to be really seamless. I've been very pleased with it. Okay, so let's keep going. So I want to talk about a couple of workflow examples of things you can do that I found useful and that my clients have found useful. Instagram, my biggest pet peeve with Instagram, and I know a lot of people share this, is that it's not designed for working with desktop. You typically have to have something on a mobile device in order to put it on Instagram. There are apps that you can get, desktop apps, and a few other ways you can do it. Last time I looked at the apps, I saw one that wanted $3 a month, and I just wasn't willing to do that. I know a lot of people who will airdrop or text or email photos to their mobile device, and then they put them on Instagram. So I want to show you the solution I came up with. I set up a collection in my desktop that's called Instagram. And if I show it to you over here for just a minute, so it's down at the bottom. So it's right down here at the bottom. It's named Instagram. Anytime I have a photo that I think might be cool for Instagram, I can just grab that photo and drag it over and drop it into my Instagram collection. And then that will make it pop into the Instagram over here on my phone. And then once I have something in my phone that I want to put on Instagram itself, I can just go directly to my phone. It's going to be there. That one isn't there yet. Oh, there it is. I'm going to pick a different one though instead of that graffiti, but the graffiti is down here. You can see it. But I'm going to go with this first one because it's just a little bit easier to look at. So if I want to share this on Instagram, I have a couple of options. I can just click the share button that's at the top. It's the square with the arrow on it. So I can tap that. I can click on share. And then you have the ability to share full size or small. And this small, I would call it more of a medium, but that's okay. So I'm going to say small. And then it wants to know how I would like to share it. And so I can just scroll over and I can find Instagram. And then, oops, I accidentally hit Dropbox, Instagram, whoops, please, let's do that again. I'm going to share, small, and I'll be more careful, Instagram. And then I can put a caption in and I can hit the share button. That works pretty well, but my preference is to use the Instagram app to do the sharing because it's got a couple of other features in it that aren't built into Adobe's version of it. So what I do instead is I tap the share button, but instead of hitting the share down below, I hit save to camera roll, and then I save a small one. It will put it on my camera roll, and then I open up my Instagram app and I just share it from there. So this way, anytime I see anything that I think might be Instagram worthy, I'm just going to throw it into that collection. And then whenever I feel like I want to share something like that, then I will just share it from my phone or my iPad. It really has smoothed that out. And one other tip, and this is on the slide, now I'll pull the slide back up in just a minute, is if you make your Instagram collection the target collection. So do you see where Day of the Dead has a little plus symbol beside it? That means that's the target collection. So I'm going to right click on Instagram and set that as my target collection. And now the little plus is there. So now all I have to do, if I wanted this, let's find this one right here, this photo to go into my target collection, I just click the little quick collection icon at the top. There's a little button right here. So if I click that, see how it turns gray? And because my Instagram is my target collection, it will just take it straight in there. So I don't even have to drag anything. Whenever I see anything Instagram worthy, I just click that little button. or I can hit the B key. B is in boy on my keyboard, and it will add it to my targeted collection. So that just kind of speeds that whole Instagram process up. So down at the bottom here, I'm saying a little tip is to make your Instagram collection the target collection. Lightroom has something called a quick collection. The target collection becomes the quick collection. So I just create the collection. I put photos in it. Whenever I feel like sharing something on Instagram, I just go to my Instagram collection and share it. And when I'm sharing this, because I have the app on my iPad and my phone, anything that I put into this synchronized system is going to appear on both of those. So here's another idea that I have some clients who are doing this is let's say that one client that does this is a wedding photographer. She's really busy, and when she gets back from a wedding, she's pretty tired to start off with. What she likes to do is import all the photos into her desktop, and as she imports them, she creates a synchronized collection. So as the photos are importing to her desktop, they are getting shared to her iPad version of Lightroom in almost real time. There's a slight delay, but they start popping up there. Then she can go sit down in a comfortable chair, pour a glass of wine, and start just going through and rating those with flags, whether they're rejects or picks, maybe put stars on some special ones. So she can go through that whole process of sorting without having to sit at her desktop. Then when she goes back to her desktop, all of the stars and flags that she's put on, any quick develop settings that she's done could be applied, and they're all going to be on her desktop, and then she can just go sort for all the reject flags and get rid of them and move on with her workflow. So it allows her to spread things out a little bit. So let's talk about that real fast. I'm going to come over to Lightroom, and you can see I did that with some Day of the Dead photos. I'm pointing at the bottom left over here. I just imported a bunch of photos from the camera there, and so that gives me the ability that I can go sort through them later on my iPad without having to sit here at my desktop. So the way that happens is if I click import, during Lightroom's import process, you have the ability to create a collection. And so I can add to a collection, I can put it into a current collection, or I can make a new collection and I can sync that with Lightroom. And so right now, as photos come in to this new collection that I create, they will automatically start appearing on my mobile devices that have Lightroom on them. And then once I'm all done with that, and I've made all those choices and everything, I can just come over and turn off syncing on my Day of the Dead collection here, or I could just delete the collection because now I've gone into the folder and worked on stuff. Eventually, I'll probably create a more specialized collection from Day of the Dead that will have 40 or 50 of the top photos in it, but it's not going to have everything. So that's just a really cool way to be able to work on your photos without sitting at your desktop. My wedding client who does that really loves that feature. When I explained it to her, she immediately bought an iPad and she said it just changed her life. Okay, and then one more here for this. I have a client who has a very large studio, but he has a special room that he likes to shoot in, and it's really small, but it has this beautiful north window light. And sometimes he has art directors and clients on site while he's working, but he doesn't really want them in the room where he's working because there just isn't room and it doesn't work for him. So he's shooting tethered. And when he's shooting tethered to a desktop computer that's in his space there, he can give his clients a mobile device that has where he's logged into it. He gives them an iPad so they can go sit in a really comfortable area downstairs where they can have coffee or a drink and have the iPad. And then as he imports through tethered into a collection, the photos can automatically just be popping up on the iPad so the clients can kind of see what's going on. You can set it up to have it, there are a couple of ways to do this. You can have it so that every photo just automatically goes in, or what you could do when you set up your tethering, which I'm not going to really cover right now due to time, but you can set it up so that that collection isn't automatically synchronized. You can have it set as a targeted collection. And that way, as my client is shooting photos, if he doesn't have to share everything, he only shares the ones that he wants, because if it's a targeted collection, he can just hit B on his keyboard, or he can click that little circle I just showed you a minute ago, and they will get added to the collection. It's just a great way for a client to be sitting downstairs or in another part of the studio or anywhere really where they've got a mobile device that's logged into his account. And again, you can have up to 4 devices, so he could have 3 iPads downstairs plus maybe his phone upstairs. Let's keep moving here. This is a common question, and I want to put a caveat here that this isn't universal. These are kind of general rules here. There are a lot of depends on, but basically, if I have photos that I'm deleting from, so let's say I've got photos that I shot with the Lightroom camera that are on my phone and they've also been copied to my desktop. If I delete them from the phone, they will stay on the desktop. So that allows me to kind of clean up my phone. Once the files have been copied over to my desktop, I don't need thousands of photos on my phone. If I've got photos on my desktop and I delete it, it will delete it from the phone and the other mobile devices as well as the desktop. So that's another way where I can keep things kind of clean. And I showed you earlier that when something's in an album, I have a couple of different options of how that works, but I may not have gone into that completely. So let's just pick one here. So I'm going into a collection, and I'm going to back up one. So to delete this, I'm just going to hold on it for a minute. So instead of doing a tap, I just held, and now I could go in and pick more if I wanted to. So I could select a bunch of them, and then there's a remove down at the bottom right. And when I tap that, it just says, do I want to remove it from the album or do I really want to delete it? So I have a couple of options when I do that. I typically don't do a lot of this management on the mobile device. I do most of that management on the desktop. And again, these are kinds of general rules because it really depends on which camera you used when you shot the photo. So if I use the native app on my iPhone to shoot that photo and I delete it from my desktop, it doesn't get deleted from the photos folder on the phone. I still have to go in and deal with that separately. But that should give you kind of an idea. Okay, so I forgot that I had a slide on this. So again, in grid view, I'm going to say done. If I want to delete photos, I just tap and hold, and then I can start picking the ones that I want to delete. I could also share those if I want. You can see down at the bottom, there are a couple of different options. If I'm in loop view where I see a single photo, this is a little more clunky. If I want to delete this photo, I have to tap the 3 buttons at the top right in the circle. That's a menu up there. And then I go into organize, and then I can delete it. There's a delete there. So lots of tapping to do it that way. That's why I probably would, if I'm going to delete photos, I find it a little bit easier to do it from the grid view where I can just tap and hold on them and pick the ones that I want to delete. So again, if I delete it from the phone, it does not get deleted from the desktop, which I really like because if they're photos that were created on the phone, I like to keep my phone cleaned up, but I don't want them to get deleted from the computer as well. But if I go to the computer and delete it from there, and it was something shot with the Lightroom camera, then it will be deleted from the phone. Okay, let's keep moving here. And I'm going to back up on the phone here, get back to my main screen. So I've run into a couple of times when a client will call me and say, you know, I went on a trip, I have a bunch of photos on my phone, I'm not seeing them, they're not coming onto my desktop. And there are a couple of different things to check when that happens. Number one is if I was shooting photos, let's say with the native app, the Apple app on my phone instead of the Lightroom app, if I want those to synchronize with my desktop, I have to come into Lightroom's app and there's a cloud symbol right up at the top right over here. When I tap on that, that will initiate syncing and it will show me how many photos are going to start syncing. Right now you can see everything is synced and backed up, so I'm getting a message that everything is fine. This is the first thing to check, and most of the time when someone calls me with this problem, that's what it is. They just have to tap that symbol to get it going. The other thing is, I'm going to go back to desktop Lightroom for a minute. At the top on my identity plate, sometimes you'll see a message above that says that it's waiting for connection. And I think that was a bug in Lightroom. I haven't seen it lately, but I was seeing it quite a bit there. Everything was connected. There wasn't a connection problem. It was more like Lightroom just kind of dropped the connection. When that happens, just restart Lightroom and that should take care of that. That will get the syncing going. Oh, and back over there for just a minute. The other thing is I've seen a couple of times where someone accidentally hit the pause button here and syncing got paused. And it will tell you syncing is paused. There will be a play button that you can just click and it will turn it back on. So if it's not the cloud symbol on your phone, then you're going to want to come over into Lightroom on the desktop and just check to make sure that it is syncing properly. Make sure it didn't get paused. If none of that works, then go to Creative Cloud, your Creative Cloud up here, and restart Creative Cloud, because I have seen one time where that was the issue, because Creative Cloud is the intermediary for all of this stuff. It has to go through there. So if I just make sure and restart that, that should take care of that. All right, let's keep moving. So this is one of my favorite features here, is the ability to share online galleries with just about anybody. And the way this works is when I have a collection on my desktop that's being synchronized with the Lightroom ecosystem, I'll call it Lightroom Mobile, it is so easy for me to put a gallery up there. So a while back, I did a project for a friend. She was writing the 8th edition of her new book, and she wanted me to shoot the cover photo, and she had something very specific that she wanted to do with her partner. And so because it was a book about exercise. So we went to a location, shot a bunch of photos. I put my top 100 pics into a gallery or into a collection, and I made that into a gallery that I shared with her. She went through and made her pics of what she liked. Then I made another collection on my desktop and put her pics into it, and then I shared that gallery with the publisher so that they could make their pick for the cover. So let's look at how that works. So I'm back over on the desktop, and I'm going to go to this architecture collection that I've got. No, that's not the one I want to do. Let's do a different one. I can see that one's already being used. Let's try this one. Okay, I'm going to my industrial one. So I'm in a collection. You can see that it's being synchronized because it's got the little lightning bolt on the left. All of these photos have lightning bolts on them on the top corner. I want to draw your attention to the very top right area up here where it says make public. This is so cool. Oops, did not mean to do that. Do that. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Let's get back over here. Industrial, that's where I was. So I'm going to click on the make public. And what it does is it creates a URL right to the left. So I'm going to click on that URL, and it's going to pull up a gallery that is starting to populate with the photos from that collection. Is that cool or what? Now, I can just take this URL, I can click up here, copy this, and share and paste it into an email and share it with someone, and they will be able to come and look at these photos. They can see them large, but what's really nice is they can't right-click and copy the photo, so it's right-click protected. If they have an Adobe account, they can click on the comment area here. Let's turn that off. They can click on the comment area here, and they can put likes and they can put comments, but they have to be signed in with an Adobe account. If it's someone who isn't really an Adobe user, they can still get a free account. So if it's like a friend that you want to share this with or whatever. Another way that I use this is when I go out shooting with other photographers just for fun. We always like to share galleries and compare notes with each other. And so it's great to be able to just throw a gallery up there real fast. They all have Adobe accounts, so they can make comments if they want to. There's also a little bit of metadata here that just tells something about the photo when I click the I for info. So this is a really nice feature. And I can just put it up there, let people look at it for as long as I want them to be able to see it. And then when I'm ready to make it private again, I'm going to click on make private. You know, it says make public, but someone's really going to need to know this URL in order to get in there, but it is kind of out there. So once I'm done and it's not shared anymore, I don't need it to be out there anymore. I just say make private, and now it's taken it down off the web and that gallery's not there anymore. I'm going to go back to the slide for just a minute. So again, you just click that make public button and boom, it just makes a gallery. You click on the link and it'll take you to the link. You can copy and paste that URL to people and share that with them. I'm going to move down to the next slide for a minute. I want to show you something a little bit different about doing this from the mobile device. So on the mobile device, I'm over here. Let's say that I want to share this bicycle album on it with an online gallery. I'm going to click the three dots to the right, which means there's a menu there. And you can see that there is something that says share and invite. It has the two people beside it. So I'm going to tap that. And I'm going to enable sharing. And that's going to put it into a gallery, and it shows me the link at the top. But this has some features that aren't on the desktop that I really like. For example, link access, I can set up to invite only, or if you look down at the bottom there, I can set it up where anyone can view it. I can invite people. If it's invite only, then I can click the invite and I can just type in people's emails and invite the people that I want to see it. So this is making it a real private gallery. I can go into the link settings. I can allow someone to download JPEGs. There might be times when I do want to allow that. Maybe I went on a trip with some friends and I don't care if they download the photos. That'll be fine. I can show location info if I want to. I can have that people ask for requests to access. So maybe someone else who's on the trip who I didn't have their email, they can send me an email and ask. And I can also customize the display, which is kind of cool. So I can go in and give it a different name. I can give it a different appearance. I can make it dark or light. I can change whether it's a photo grid or columns or one up. So you have a lot more options here when you're sharing an online gallery than you do when working with the desktop version. Let me get back to my main screen here. Okay, there we are. I'm hoping that at some point Adobe's going to add those same features to the Lightroom Classic on the desktop, because it would just make sense. I've always wanted the ability to make a completely private gallery and be able to share it just with specific individuals. All right, so let's move on. So I want to talk a little bit about this app. I've been using it over here and I haven't really taken time to explain it. So I just want to go over a couple of basics before we go to questions. So if I want to use the camera, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my phone here and put it into a tripod. Just a second. Do that. Okay, so I'm going to tap the phone, the camera icon that's down at the bottom right. And it opens up the camera, and I've got it pointed at this cool old camera that someone gave me this weekend. Let me just adjust this a little bit. There we go. And right by default, you're typically going to see it set on auto. So right next to the shutter button, it says auto, and it's just ready to go. At the top, notice where it says DNG. So I'm going to tap there. I can capture files with the Lightroom camera as DNG RAW files or JPEG. That's a pretty cool feature to be able to actually capture RAW on the camera. Down below where it says auto, if I tap that, then I can go into professional mode and I have a little bit more control over the settings on the camera. If I type pro mode again, I have the high dynamic range, so I can shoot HDR in camera, and that gives me the ability to get a little bit more dynamic range. That's all cool, and I really like that a lot, but I'm going to be honest with you that I use the app camera on the native one on the phone instead, because it has other features that I feel aren't really in the Lightroom camera. And I know Adobe's working on that, so I'm hoping that they're going to add some of those. But for example, the this is an iPhone 11, so it's got the Deep Fusion on it, which is something new, a new algorithm they're using, and it does a pretty nice job. I might want to use the portrait setting, which I use quite a bit, so it's kind of nice to have that available here. I shoot video sometimes, so it's nice to be able to shoot video straight from this camera, which you can't do with the Lightroom phone. This camera doesn't capture in the RAW format. It uses something called HEIC, which is a file format that Apple is using to make their files nice and small, but it still has 16-bit and it's got a lot of data in the highlights. I've been doing some comparisons between the DNGs and the files that are the DNGs that I capture in Lightroom with the camera and photos that I capture with the Apple camera. And it really, I'm finding that it depends on the scenario. I'm still kind of doing testing because this phone is somewhat new to me, but I'm finding that I'm leaning more toward using the native camera than the Lightroom camera. The only plus I see right now in the Lightroom camera is it does have pro mode where I have a little bit more control over some of my settings. And it also has the ability to shoot DNG. There are three little dots right over, I'm going to point with my mouse right here at the top of the camera. I'm going to tap on that on my camera. This is where I can set up a few things. That menu opens up some settings. It's where I can change my aspect ratio. I can turn on a self timer. I can put a grid on with a level, which you can see I have. And I'm going to go into Pro mode here. And when I do that, you can see that I've got zebra stripes showing where it's showing me a highlight clipping, which is the little triangular thing up here at the top. So I can turn that off or I can turn it back on. That isn't active when you're shooting HDR. So that's why I couldn't show it to you a minute ago in HDR. And then when I tap on the little gear, it just lets me do a couple of things like here, like geotag the photos, which I like to do. I don't want to save the unprocessed original. I don't see a need for that. And I don't need to change my screen brightness, but if I was outside, I might want to change that. And then when I'm ready to turn that off, I just hit the three little dots again. You can see the three little dots brings us up and puts them away. So the Lightroom camera has some settings that are kind of cool, but I'm still finding that I'm using my native camera. But what's really cool, no matter which camera I use, those photos are going to come straight into Lightroom. Let me pull this out of the tripod for a minute. And so when I shoot photos with the Lightroom camera, they're going to go into the folder that's at the top there that's called Lightroom Camera Photos. And you can see a lot of my photos are things like this, you know, the dogs and the cats doing funny stuff or whatever. But then other times it's stuff that is related to my work. It's like someone want to know what one of my travel kits looks like. Okay, so I'm going to back up. Photos that are shot with either any camera, or photos that are shot with my Apple camera, or photos that are in any of these collections / albums are going to be under all Lightroom photos here. So everything is under that. Deleted photos, if I go into deleted, it will show you that those photos are 60 days before they're permanently deleted, so you can always change your mind. Then down below, I've got my albums. So let's keep moving on our slideshow over here. So let's talk about some of the things that you see here. At the top right on the phone, there's a little house symbol, that's home. And if you click there, it just shows whatever was recent. I was doing some testing in low light. That's one of the other features that I really like about the Apple camera app, is it does amazing stuff in near darkness. I can't believe how good it does. There are also some tutorials and other things here that are kind of cool. I'm going to the next symbol to the right of the house up there, and that's the album view. It looks like books that are stacked or something like that. And so this is where I've been this whole time with the albums. And then the third one that has the two people on it, that shows me how many of these albums are in galleries that are online. They're ones where I put up a gallery so people could see them. And then it gives me the ability to modify those galleries by clicking the three dots off to the right. I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm going to go back into the album view. And I'm going to open up an album. And when I do that, I'm going to go to the next slide here for a minute. There are a couple of symbols at the top that I want to show you. There's a search, the little magnifying glass. I'm going to tap that. And this is using an algorithm or a feature that Adobe has called Sensei AI, artificial intelligence. They're starting to integrate this into some of their programs. This is pretty cool. I'm going to type the word bridge in here. And tell it to search for bridge, and it just finds photos that have bridges. And I'm going to tell you right now, a couple of these photos are keyworded with bridge, maybe one of them, the other ones aren't. It is using artificial intelligence to look for bridges. It's pretty amazing to me. And I've done some testing with this, and you know, it makes mistakes every once in a while, of course, but it's kind of surprising what it can do. So that is the search symbol. I'm coming back over here. The one next to the magnifying glass is a funnel. So it helps you to filter things. So if I tap the funnel, I have all sorts of different ways that I can sort. I can sort by file type, camera. If I'm using the people tags, I can use location, keywords. So lots of different ways that I can search. I've already mentioned, let's back up here. The cloud symbol just lets me know if things are backed up and what's going on with that. If I have just one photo pulled up and I hit the cloud, then it tells me that whether that's a smart preview or is it a raw file. So it'll tell me what kind of file it is when I'm in loop view. Let's go back here. And then the three dots off to the right, again, that is my main menu for all my settings. So I can, this is my share and invite, my segmentation, my view options, and then down at the very bottom are the master settings that you saw earlier when we were looking at this. So that's what those little icons are right there. I do want to point out something else, so I'm going to just pull up a photo here. Up at the top, do you see it says review up here at the very top? So this is the activity picker. When I've got a single photo up, this is how I determine what kind of activity I want to be doing. Right now it's set on review, so I can go in and put stars and flags. If I tap up there, I can set it on activity. And this would be if someone had been responding. So let's say I've got a gallery that's out there that I shared with people, and someone is going in and making comments. Those comments will show here. And they will also show on the desktop version down at the bottom. Probably most people have never even noticed as comments down here because there's never anything in it. Those are comments from online galleries that have been shared. So that's what's going on with that. Back to the slideshow. So that's the activity is activity. If I click again, I can go down and I can do some keywording. So I can put some keywords on. I generally prefer to do my keywording on the desktop with a full keyboard, but I know lots of people who are using mobile devices for keywording because they're in the field or for whatever reason. I can go to info and it's just going to give me some information about this photo, when it was shot, what some of the basic settings were. If I want to develop the photo, I can tap on edit, and then all of the little edit buttons appear at the bottom. On the iPad, they're going to be on the right instead of the bottom. But for example, if I want to adjust the light settings on this, I can just click on that and I can adjust my exposure, my highlights, my shadows. Most of the stuff that is in the desktop version of Lightroom Classic is going to be here. More and more things are constantly being added. You can go in with the adjustment brush and darken something. You can add gradients. You can do just about any of that stuff. And again, if I do it on the mobile device, those settings are going to be applied to my desktop version where the original file is. All right. So I'm just going to throw a couple more tips out there before I wrap this up. So you saw me doing this. If I'm in grid view and I want to see a photo, I just tap it. I use the develop panels like I just showed you if I want to make adjustments to it. If I've got something that's been edited, I didn't mention this before, I can tap and hold it to see the before and then let go to see the after. So you can see it says before at the top. The adjustments on this one are pretty minimal. Let's see this one. That's the before, this is the after. And 2 fingers again, 2-finger tap takes it through the different overlays. Okay, so I'm running out of time here, so I think it's a good time for questions.
From Paul Hapron, what are the differences between iPhone versus Android?
There are some subtle differences. Some of the buttons are in slightly different places. And I'm going to be honest, I haven't used it on Android as much as I would like to. Most of the people I've worked with are using Apple devices. I know plenty of people use Android. I've seen a couple of differences, but it's hard for me to speak to that. And you're going to also see a few differences between a phone and a tablet because things are laid out a little differently because you've got a lot more screen real estate on a tablet.
From Michael Schleider, are CC Cloud files stored as RAW or are they sidecars like Classic?
So if these are photos that are on the desktop, they're going to be RAW, potentially with the sidecar file with the metadata. When I'm sharing those from the desktop to mobile and using a collection, on the phone, I'm just going to be getting smart previews. So the RAW file stays on the desktop. I hope that answers that question.
From Lisa Corson, what are best practices for editing on the go when Classic CC is the main software regarding syncing developed settings and file handling?
Well, when I've got, if I've got photos that are on my Classic on my desktop and I'm synced them through a collection to my mobile device, any developing I do on the mobile device will be applied to my desktop Classic. So it's a pretty seamless thing. I don't really have to do anything to ensure that that's happening other than to click the cloud to make sure that my syncing is being active.
From Jeff Johnson, is it possible to have multiple mobile catalogs that sync back to mobile, or do I have to treat each shoot as individual jobs?
So you can only sync one catalog at a time, and that catalog is what you're going to be seeing on the mobile device. So the things that I've synced from that catalog are the things on the mobile device. So it's not like the mobile device has its own catalog that is separate from the catalog on my desktop. It's more a mirror of the things that I've chosen to sync.
From Jen Magidson, how do you keyword sync between mobile and desktop. Mobile is not recognizing some in-camera settings and threatening to revert everything. What do I do?
So I have seen, for like a minute ago, I pulled up keywords on a photo when I went into the keywording, and it showed there weren't any keywords, and it allowed me to enter keywords, but it didn't show the keywords that were currently on the photo on my desktop. I can add additional keywords on the mobile device and they'll be applied to the desktop, but it doesn't always show me keywords that have been applied on the desktop. I'm assuming that's going to be fixed pretty soon. I haven't seen anything where it told me that it was going to revert the settings.
From Catherine Gooding, will Lightroom sync in the background? I gave up using it because it would only sync when the app was open.
So if the app has to be open on the phone in order for it to sync, this is true because I might shoot a bunch of photos with both cameras. Some of them will sync automatically, but the photos I shot with the native camera on my phone don't until I open up the app and hit the cloud, and then I just leave the app running. If we're talking about the desktop app, if I'm trying to sync something from the desktop to the phone, the desktop's going to have to be open. If I'm syncing from the phone to the desktop photos that I'm creating on my phone, the app doesn't have to be open on the desktop for the syncing to happen, but I will have to open it at some point, obviously, because those things are being queued up in the Creative Cloud.
From Karen Hirsch, if you have synced your collection and moved the photos in the collection in your computer, will the photos be removed from your phone or no longer be accessible on the phone?
If they're in a synced collection and I move them to a different folder on the desktop, if that's what the question is, as long as they stay in that synced collection, there should be no problems.
When mobile captures are transferred to your desktop, are they full res?
Yes, they are. It's the exact same thing. So if I shoot a DNG using the Lightroom camera, the thing that comes in on my desktop is a DNG. If it's an Apple photo, then it's an HEIC.
Okay. From Michael Coe, when making a collection public, can you password protect the URL?
That's where I would have to use the mobile device to configure those settings. The way I was showing that you could make it private. So it wouldn't be password protected, but someone would have to receive an invitation from me to get it.
From Karen Hirsch, is there a watermark feature so that you can watermark the photos in your gallery before showing the images to your client?
I'm going to say yes, but I want to follow up on that. I'm pretty sure you can. When I put a photo onto Instagram using Lightroom, it's always watermarked because I had the watermark setting set up the way I showed you earlier. It's been a little while since I did that with a gallery, so I'm going to say yes, but with the caveat that I would check that just to be sure. But you saw the watermark settings earlier where you can configure your sharing watermarks when you share, and I'm pretty sure it can be done. But it's a pretty rudimentary watermark. You can customize it a little bit, but to the best of my knowledge, you can't use a graphic on it like you can with a desktop.
From Mark Beeler, how is it possible to have all your catalogs combined in one if you shoot hundreds of events per year?
I guess it really depends. I mean, I know people who have 200,000-300,000 photos in their catalogs. But I also know a lot of event photographers who shoot way more than that. You might end up, if that's the way you like to work, then you might want to go ahead and have sort of a master catalog for your portfolios and whatnot, and have event catalogs. My analogy is that I want my catalog to kind of be the way the library does it. I want to have a master catalog that has everything in it. So when I do a keyword search, I can look through everything rather than having to keyword search every catalog. Here in Multnomah County, which I'm in Portland, Oregon, the Multnomah County library system has 20 libraries. I like the fact that when I go online to look for a book or a movie or whatever through their catalog, it searches all 20 libraries. I don't have to go to a separate library card catalog and search them individually. But I understand there are some people who shoot a lot, and they, the most I've seen is 500,000 photos in a Lightroom catalog, and that's where it might be good to go ahead and start a new catalog. But I know lots of people who do separate catalogs for every event, like wedding photographers and event photographers. That makes it a little tougher to do this, but you're just going to have to pick one catalog to share.
From Bob Kroll, with a Wi-Fi only iPad, can I show clients my previously synced photos if I do not have Wi-Fi access at the moment?
Yes, you can. They'll be on there. They're smart previews. They should look pretty good. Something that I do just as a bit of insurance, because my iPad is Wi-Fi only as well, and I know I'm going to be showing a gallery to somebody. Before I go to that meeting, I just go into all those photos and I just go to loop view on each one at a time, just so that it renders a nice preview, and I know that it's all good. Generally, a smart preview should render well on your screen, but I have had a few times where it didn't pop into complete focus. And so if I just kind of right before the meeting go through those and tap on each one and have them go fit on the screen, that usually does the trick.
And for our last question from David Lubrowski, how do you color calibrate iPhone and Android devices so the mobile edits are meaningful?
So from my desktop, I use the i1 Display Pro for my calibration. And i1 has an app that you can download where you can calibrate mobile devices. So I've calibrated my iPad Pro with that. The downside is the only time that calibration is in effect is when you're using that app. So it's mostly useless for the way I do things, because I'm using Lightroom most of the time when I'm looking at my photos, and that's not color calibrated. I'm hoping that the manufacturers are going to solve that problem, because it's becoming something that more and more people are asking about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and tips. To everybody out there, have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.